Hey there, it's Connor with Lichtenfeld's. We thank you for joining us this morning. Today's topic is going to be called Made in the Shade. We're going to be featuring some shady plants that we sell here at the nursery. I'm going to be highlighting some of my favorites, and we're just really going to go through some different layers, starting with the highest layer, so things you can use for creating privacy in a shady spot, and then step it down to more of a foundation size, maybe a little bit taller, and then go down even further from that and talk about some ground cover, low growing perennials, things like that that you can use for a shady spot in the garden. We'll also talk about some accent plants that you can use, and we'll also go through some ornamental trees that you can use in a shadier, or what we call an understory section of your yard. So we'll start from the top. We'll talk about the privacy plants, things to provide a cover, maybe from a neighbor you don't want to see, or something like that. So you see here we're in our shady area of the garden, and we've used a couple of these in our garden to either create a block from the road, the traffic area outside, or just to add some interest in this area. So we will start with one of the largest growing ones that I have here. This is an evergreen viburnum. It's called Chindo. Some people pronounce it Chindo, Chindo. Chindo, however you want to pronounce it, but it's an evergreen viburnum, and it's a great, what I call a crossover plant. It's something that you can use in a sunny area, but you can also use it in a shady area as well. So if you aren't sure what your sun exposure is, maybe you're planting in the wintertime, Chindo is a great one for you to start with. This guy is, like you can see, it's got a dark green leaf on it. It's a very glossy leaf, so which means that it will tolerate sun as well as the shady conditions. And Chindo is a very large grower. It'll get, I think ours here in the garden is, I'm looking up at it now, it's probably 20-25 feet tall. So it has gotten up quite tall and has really maintained a nice and dense habit even in a shady area. So I really like Chindo, not only for shade but also for a sunny area. Provide a really nice dark green background where you can then have some flowering things in the foundation to create little pops of color. So moving on to the next. Now, one of my parents' favorite plants for shade is a plant called Cleara, Japanese Cleara. This is a specific variety called Leanne. I tried to figure out what was different about Leanne than the species, and all I could come up with is that the leaf is a little bit smaller. But this plant is going to get about 10 or 12 feet tall. I think the species will get larger with time. But this one is marketed by Southern Living as about 10 to 12 feet in maturity and nearly as wide. So it'll be a large barrier plant. And not only does it have the dark green foliage, but the new growth on it is like a coppery red color, which adds some interest during the spring season when everything is flushing out with new growth. So Cleara can be used in the sun as well, so sun or shade for this plant. But you can see here it's got a nice dense look to it. I really like the foliage on it, and it just creates a nice background similar to the Chindo but with a smaller leaf to it. So we'll move to another. This is one that I use at my personal home. This is a type of plant called Distilium. Now, most folks know Distilium as a foundation plant, usually used in sun. We've actually found that it does really well in shade too. This specific variety is a larger growing one called Linebacker. And it's called that because it is big and broad. It grows 10 feet tall, nearly 10 feet wide, probably 8 feet wide, and is described on our sign as like a whiskey barrel shape. So just really big and takes up a lot of space, which is something you probably want if you're looking for privacy in your area. The linebackers that I have planted in my house, the reason I used it is because it is another crossover plant, so something that can go from sun or to shade. And so my area caught sun on one side, but then on the other was quite shady, and I needed a barrier to go all the way across the entire thing. So planted it up with linebacker. The ones in the sun are equally as healthy as the ones in the shade. The shade ones have probably not grown quite as fast, but still are very nice and dense and look like really nice, healthy plants. So Linebacker Distilium, another one that you can use in the shady border, or shady privacy border, I should say. So one other one that I'll talk about for privacy, it's not quite as tall as these plants here, but it will provide kind of an ornamental piece to your landscape. is this guy right here. And I mean, just look at the flower on it is really, really remarkable. Most folks will probably know this is a camellia. It's Camellia japonica. It's got the large glossy leaves, better for a spot that receives at least a little bit of shade in the afternoon. But the flower on it is really, really stunning, and it's going to be in the late winter to early spring. It's going to have flowers like this on it. This is a variety called Jack's, I should say, Jack's Camellia, and this one's been a really big seller for us this spring, and even in the wintertime when they didn't have leaves on and people really liked the glossy foliage to it. So something that you maybe wouldn't want to plant the entire border with this plant. I'm an advocate for a mixed screen, not only because it provides a little bit of interest, like textural interest and things like that, color interest, but it also future-proofs you in case there's some disease that ever comes out that maybe wipes out a certain type of plant. If you have the same thing planted 50 of them across a line, you're going to lose every single thing in your row. Versus if you do a mixed border, then the worst thing that happens is maybe you lose one out of every 2 or 3 plants. So again, no one wants to think about that doomsday situation, but it does future-proof you from that happening. And something like Jack's Camellia would be great to add in. I think this plant gets about 8 or 10 feet tall, so it'll still get quite tall, but it would be something maybe to have the larger plants in the foreground and have this in front. So anyway, that's enough for the privacy plants. We're going to move on now to some foundation plants that you can use in the shade, and we will just go over a couple of my favorites. So be right back. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the foundation, and by that I'm referring to anything in a size range of maybe 3 feet tall up to maybe 5 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller than that, but generally stuff that's not going to provide a block or a barrier from things, but something that'll provide textural interest, maybe something that flowers so it's got a nice color to it, just something to add as another layer behind the larger growing things if you're desiring privacy. These can also be used as standalones, maybe a shady foundation around the house. That's why called foundation plants, not only because they can go around the foundation of the house, but they're like the building blocks of the landscape. So we're going to start with Mahonia right here. This is a variety called Narihira. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But a lot of people know Mahonia as a plant that's got like a thorny, kind of a spiny look to it. This one is a really dulled down version of Mahonia with a smaller, very much smaller leaf to it. And I really just like the foliage of it. I like the texture, how it's just kind of light and really fine, and it just provides some really nice texture. If you've got an area that maybe has a lot of really large leaf plants in it, this kind of adds some nice texture to it. It also has a flower during the year when a lot of stuff doesn't. It's going to be a winter flowering plant. So usually I think it was into December or January this year, the Mahonia was blooming in our garden. And it's just got a big, I think it's a big yellow flower pod on top of it that then goes to seed after that and has some really neat looking blue seeds that the birds eat up. As you can see, this one has none left because birds are taking care of it. So Narihira Mahonia, it's going to be like 4 feet tall and wide, so it would be great for setting in front of something a little bit larger, or maybe just adding a dark green that you can then plant a lighter colored perennial in front of. So I'm going to set him down and go on to a viburnum. This is one of our favorites. This is called Moonlit Lace Viburnum. It's a Davidii viburnum, which are used a lot out west, but generally don't like the heat and humidity here in the south. This Davidii viburnum has been crossed with another viburnum variety to provide the ability to thrive in the heat and humidity of the southeast. And Moonlit Lace Viburnum, it really just checks a lot of boxes. You can use it in sun, you can use it in shade. It has evergreen foliage. It's got a white flower on it. And in the wintertime, even when there's no flowers, it's got a red stem to it, so you still have some interest there. So it really checks a lot of boxes. Probably 4 feet tall, nearly as wide, probably just as wide. Some folks have said that it stays a little bit smaller, but I'm going to say about 4 feet tall on this. We've used it in a lot of applications in customers' landscapes, and then also in some of our own personal homes, some of our staff. I think just about everybody on staff has now planted one of these because we like it so much. But just a great one that'll survive not only in the sun, but does great in a shady or filtered sun area. So that's moonlit lace viburnum. Okay, and I won't spend much time on these because a lot of people probably do know about the Encore series of azaleas, but if you don't, Encore azaleas are called that because they bloom in multiple seasons. So it's going to be a heavy spring bloom, sporadic blooms during the summertime, and then again in the fall. So you get a lot more flowers as opposed to like with the azaleas at the Masters, which look gorgeous in April, but then there's nothing for the rest of the year. The Encores provide a lot more flower, a lot more bang for your buck, really, when you're buying the plant. And there's a wide variety. I think there's something like 30-something of them in the series. Really, every color an azalea can come in. There's an Encore azalea that has that color. And most of them are also unique in that, as opposed to traditional azaleas that really prefer to have some shade, there are most of the Encore varieties, not all, there are some exceptions, but most of the Encore varieties are great either in a shady area or in a sunny area. Some people have even said they see more flower production in a sunnier area with the Encores. This is one that I just personally like. It's called Sunburst. This one's going to be like a 3x3 grower, so it's not a big plant. Great for a shady area. Got a pop of color whenever you got a lot of dark colors. This would be a great azalea to plant there because you got a really vibrant flower that comes off of it. Yeah, and I just like the color of it. It's just one of my favorites. Other staff members have their favorites, but again, there's like 30 of them in the series, so I'm sure that there's one that you'll like for your shady landscape. So that's Encore azaleas. And I know I've said on a lot of the other plants that they're kind of crossovers, so they can either do sun or shade. These next two that I'm going to talk about, they need to be in shade. Would not plant them in an area that doesn't receive afternoon shade. This first one I'll talk about, this one is called Florida Sunshine. It's a type of anise. Some people also call it starflower. Got a bunch of different names, but it's something that really brightens up a dark area of the garden. Got a really nice chartreuse foliage, as you can see there, and almost a red stem to the anise as well. It also produces a star-shaped flower. I don't see it very prevalently on the Florida Sunshine. There are lots of other varieties that do have a much more prominent flower, but all of them are great for shade. Now this plant will bleach out if it's in too much sun. I had some in a spot in my yard that after 11 o'clock they didn't get in sun, but that was still too much sun for it because they turned kind of a bleachy color and it just wasn't good. So I think that an area that just a very small amount of morning sun, or even like filtered sun all day, I think would be great. Just something that's cutting the rays a little bit during the summertime will keep Florida Sunshine looking really, really nice. Another great thing about anise, anything in the anise family, is that the leaves are licorice scented. So when you bust the leaf, you can smell it. Smells just like the anise spice that many people use in baking. So that's Florida Sunshine anise, about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. Great one for the shady border as well. And we'll move on to this guy. Another one that needs shade, would not plant it in sun. I consider, this is a plant called Pieris. I consider Pieris to be kind of a challenge plant just because they're probably not the easiest thing out there to grow. They like to be dry and they like to be in the shade, but not too dry or else they'll die. Not too wet or they die. So I think it's kind of like, like Proverbs say, it's just, you can't have it all. This plant is one that is gorgeous. It has a lot of things going for it, but on the negative side, it's just a little bit tougher to grow. Now that being said, a lot of people in the northern counties have seen that they've done a lot better with this plant in a little bit more sun. So that would just be something you'd have to try at your own home. But as far as interest in the early springtime, you really can't beat Pieris. It's got these bell-shaped flowers on it. This particular variety is called Katsura. It has kind of a pinkish red flower to it. Yeah, just a really nice looking plant. Texturally interesting with the leaves, evergreen. Katsura gets a little bit taller. I think it's like a 4 to 5 footer. But again, nothing that's going to overpower a space, and just something that would be great for a shady part of the yard. So that's Katsura Pieris. And then lastly on the foundation plants, I'm going to talk about, let's pull that back, talk about Southern Spreading Yew. Really adaptable plant. A lot of people do plant this plant in sun. We have found that it keeps the darkest green color in a shady area. It's something we've used a lot in our garden here at the nursery, and then also at other staff members' homes. Really gorgeous yews that are planted up underneath the river birch in our garden. It's not a true yew, it's not a Taxus yew. Those are better for up north or areas that are not as humid. This is a Cephalotaxus or false yew, but all the same, it has a very similar foliage to the northern yews that you see. And it's just a great plant for providing coverage in an area that maybe you still want a little bit of height, but you really need to cover some ground. This plant is just a great looking evergreen for that shady area. So now we're going to move on to some accent plants, and we're also going to talk about some deciduous flowering plants that'll be great for the shade. So we'll move around some stuff and be right back with these guys here. So these are some of my favorites that are deciduous, so they're not going to provide a ton of cover, but they have some really interesting flowers and just some interesting features that we'll get into. So we will start with this guy here. Now for folks that are native lovers, like to try and incorporate as many native plants as they can into the landscape, this is a plant called Fothergilla. Specifically, this is a variety called Mount Airy. Now you can see we're filming this towards the end of March, so it has not gotten its leaves yet, but that's a good thing because we get to see the flower. So you can see on this guy right here on the camera, it's got like a really frilly looking white flower on it that's just really interesting. We can zoom in on that. Really interesting looking flower. This one's just starting to open up, but I just thought it would be cool to feature this one. Fothergilla is great for either dry or kind of wetter soil. Again, it's a native plant, so a lot of these native plants can tolerate some soggier soil. And it's great for sun or for shade as well. I've seen it in both. We have it planted in shade in our garden. I think it's going to do the best there. But a great native plant that provides some interest. The twigs almost seem to have like a bend to them, which adds some interest even in the wintertime when there's not a whole lot going on with it. Still looks kind of funky. Then you get this flower, and then the leaf itself has got some really deep veining to it, which makes it interesting once the leaves come out. It almost looks to me like witch hazel, something like that. But it's just an interesting looking plant, something that maybe some other folks may not have, and especially if you're trying to stick with natives, Fothergilla would be a great one to go with. Mount Airy is going to be a variety that's going to get about 4 or 5 feet tall and wide. But yeah, great plant to incorporate. Also kind of sort of sticking with the native trend is sweet shrub right here. Another one that looks like sticks in a pot of dirt, but I promise it's going to be really pretty in about a month. So we do sell the native Carolina sweet shrub, the Calycanthus floridus, I think it is. This one is a new one from Proven Winners. If you can't tell from some of the products we've had, we sell a lot of Proven Winners stuff. So Proven Winners, if you're watching this, hook us up because we sell a lot of your stuff. So this is a great variety that has come out from Proven Winners. It is not native, it is a hybrid. It is the native one hybridized with another Calycanthus from Asia, I believe. But this is a variety called Aphrodite, which you can kind of see on here what the flower looks like. It's also nicknamed Carolina Allspice. The species that's native is nicknamed Carolina Allspice, or again, sweet shrub, because it's got a really interesting scent to it. A lot of people can't exactly nail down what it smells like. Some people say it smells like bubble gum. Some people say it smells kind of spicy, but it's got a different scent for every person. So just something kind of interesting that maybe some other folks wouldn't have in their landscape, and they do great in a shady or filtered sun area in the yard. So again, this is Calycanthus Aphrodite. This is a larger grown variety. I'm gonna cheat, but I think it's like 6 feet tall. So we know that means 8 feet tall. So it's going to be a larger plant, but it would be great for filling in an area that's going in front of some maybe some existing privacy stuff you've already got going on. So anyway, that's Calycanthus Aphrodite. Now this one right here is another Proven Winners. It's a Hydrangea serrata. Hydrangea serrata is different than the big leaf hydrangea or Hydrangea macrophylla. That's like the big snowball shaped shade hydrangeas that you see a lot of. I figured everybody knew about those, so I thought we'd do something a little bit different. So yeah, this is Hydrangea serrata, mountain hydrangea. Specifically, this variety is called Tough Stuff. They're called that because they're super cold hardy, like way colder than we would ever get here in South Carolina. But all the same, they do great in our area. Now, proven winners, I got a finger point at you a little bit. They do market it as a full sun plant. We have trialed it and we found that it will survive in full sun, but it really does best if it catches some shade in the afternoon. I think that's going to be the same with all the mountain hydrangeas. We have planted it at our house in a full sun spot, and it looks good until about June or July, and then starts looking kind of tired. So I think for a shady or a filtered sun spot, Tough Stuff hydrangea would be a great one. Now, mountain hydrangeas, the Hydrangea serrata is what's called a lace cap hydrangea. So rather than having a big mop head, flower ball, it's going to be more of a lacy, multiple flowers around a center, like a center cluster. So it's a really interesting looking flower. Probably can't see the tag from here, but this would be a good place to plug. We're going to put all of the plants that we used here, we'll put in the description so that you can actually shop these off of our website. And you can look up a little bit of info on the Tough Stuff. And there's a lot in the series too. Tough Stuff, there's a smaller Tough Stuff. This one gets about 3 feet. The smaller one is supposed to stay a little bit smaller. There's a Tough Stuff Red. There's Tough Stuff Aha, which is like more of a blue. This one is going to be either a purple or a pink, depending on your pH. And then, so that's some flowering stuff that we've got. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of accent plants that you could use. This is an evergreen plant. It is in the same family as the spreading yew that we had from earlier, Cephalotaxis, except this is an upright one, Fastigiata. Great for really narrow spaces in the shade. Gets about 6 feet tall, grows slow, stays really tight, so it would be great for planters, shady planters, or for just a nice narrow spot in your landscape. And then you can see off to my left here, I guess I'll bring it around front. You can see this right here. My favorite trees for shade are Japanese maples. This is a really unique one called Ryusin. Ryusin is a weeping palmatum, which is really interesting. Most of the weeping ones are the lace leaf maple, but this is a palmatum, so it's like a hand shape, and it's a weeping form. Does great in a filtered sun spot. I wanted to feature Ryusin just because I thought it was a really interesting one, and it was starting to leaf out. But we have probably the biggest selection of Japanese maples in the upstate. Usually we keep between 150 and 200 Japanese maples in stock, sometimes even more than that. So Japanese maples, just about all of them are great for a filtered sun spot in the yard. So I think that pretty much covers the flowering plants and the accent trees, accent plants. And just lastly, want to go ahead and go into some quick ground covers, and then we'll wrap up. So we will get those and be right back. Okay, so we've gotten our privacy plants down for your shady area in the garden. We've gotten your foundation plants and all of your stuff that's going to get like 3 to 5 feet. We got all that done. So now we have the very bottom layer of ground covers and some flowering perennials that you can use in the shade. I'm going to start with some of these grasses over here. One of my favorite grasses for shade is Carex grass, and these are two of our favorite varieties that we sell. So these are grasses that will bleach out a little bit if they're in too much sun, so would keep your sun until no more than maybe noon on the Carex. This is a variety called Everillo. Everillo Carex, you can see, has got a kind of a golden green chartreuse look to it. Adds pop of color whenever you've got a lot of dark stuff. It's going to get probably 18 inches tall, 2 feet wide, something like that. And it's just a great, easy, really hard to kill little guy for the shade. It also has a kind of a khaki colored plume that comes up usually around this time of year. So this is Everillo Carex, and then we've also got Evergold Carex, which you can see has kind of a different veining to it. It's got both like a creamy white and then also a green color on it. And I have seen the Evergold actually planted in a more sunny area. We used it in some of our display troughs out in front of the nursery, and it did really well in full sun. So we're still going to sell it as a shade plant, but I bet you could stick it in the sun. Now, both of these need to be in like average moisture. If you have an area that is holding water, something that looks very similar is sweet flag grass. This is a variety called Ogon. This guy is just going to really slowly kind of run over a kind of a moist, soggy area. It also can grow in a drier area, but kind of a moist or soggy area is perfect for sweet flag grass. We use it in an area in our shady garden here at the nursery, and just a really easy, carefree plant. Provides that same nice color for the darker areas in the garden. Let's see, ferns are really big for shade, obviously. We have tons and tons of varieties of ferns. Yana and Courtney are doing a great job of bringing in new varieties for us this spring. But I just wanted to talk about one of these evergreen ferns here, something that'll provide interest for you year-round. This is tassel fern. A lot of people know autumn fern for the shade, but tassel fern is another one that we really like. You can see it's got kind of a glossy look to it, kind of an interesting texture, really finely serrated on the individual fronds, and just a really easy little fern. It's going to get, I think we say on the sign, maybe 24 inches tall on tassel, maybe not even that tall. So it's just a kind of a small little one that'll will really work well. You can see just paired up with some of this other stuff. Just provides a nice textural difference and color differences between the two for the shade. Right, rearrange some stuff. And heuchera, or coral bells, are also great for shade. This is a variety called Forever Red right here. It's going to get up about this tall, a little bit wider. Coral bells are going to have this color year-round. They are evergreen. And then it's going to have a flower on the top, and those flowers usually last for quite some time, starting kind of in the mid to late spring and then sporadically after that. So coral bells add some great color. One of Yana's favorites here at the nursery, she uses heuchera in almost all of her shade pots that she does. So now let's talk about these guys right here. This is columbine. Now columbine is a perennial, so it'll die to the ground in the winter and then come back in the early spring. But these are just an assorted color. I don't know if we have specific named varieties on columbine, but it's just something really nice to add color into the garden. You can see the flowers there are really unique, and you're going to have multi-colors from the ones that you get from us here at Lichtenfeld's. So columbine is a great one to add some extra color into the garden. We used it in a shady bed underneath some water oaks at our house and have been really happy with them. Another plant that we used in that same bed is this guy right here, which is Foxglove, or also Digitalis. It's known as Digitalis. Foxglove is deer resistant, mostly because it's poisonous. So if they eat it, they die. And most of the deer are smart enough to not die. So Foxglove is great. Most folks know what that is, but it's got a really nice flower stalk that comes out of it. Flowers all over the whole thing. It's a perennial, it dies to the ground, and then ours is already coming back at the house. So a great one to add some color. And I mean, you cannot beat how big of a flower this thing has on it. So that's Digitalis, or Foxglove. Let's see. And then lastly, I've got Aspidistra here, or cast iron. If you need something a little bit taller, you got a really shady, like I'm talking like in a closet, dark area. This is probably the most shade tolerant of any of the plants that we have here at the nursery. Cast iron is called that because it is really rock solid and it's hard to kill, really easy to grow. So cast iron, it does need kind of average moisture soil. It probably couldn't stay in a real soggy area, but it provides a really nice dark green and a taller texture. Right there, you can pair it up with something a little bit lower, have this a little bit taller, and boom, you have a combination for shade. So I'm really just scratching the surface. I know it's been a lot that we've gone through. I've thrown out a lot of information, but we're just scratching the surface of the stuff that we have here at the nursery. In the spring, we're going to have literally thousands of different types of perennials, and I've just gone over a couple of them. So the next logical step would be for you to take a visit out to Lichtenfeld Nurseries. We would love to help you this spring. Tons of really great things that are going to be coming in. We'd also love for you to give us a follow on social media. If you're watching this live, you already follow us, so great job. But we'd love for you to follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram. We use both of those most heavily. And then also on our new website. We have a new website up and running that does have all of our trees and shrubs itemized on the website. All of the plants that you see here, or at least all of the trees and shrubs, will be linked in the description to a collection that has all of our shade picks on it, so you'll be able to shop those directly from our website. Let's see, was I supposed to plug anything else? I think that's it. So I just wanted to show you guys some of my shade favorites for the day. Again, would love for you to give us a follow online, keep in touch with what we're doing here at the nursery. Yeah, come out and see our staff. We'd love to help you, love to give you recommendations for a sunny, shady, really any area that you have around your home. We would love to help you out. So again, I thank you for watching, and hope you come and see us soon.